What is Batman's greatest weapon? I'll give you a hint. It's not his batarangs, his smoke bombs, or his grappling hook. It's not the Batmobile or the Batwing. It's not his detective skills or even his fists. Batman's greatest weapon is fear. Unlike most other superheroes who rely on their powers or gadgets to fight crime, Batman understands that fear, when used strategically, can be a very powerful tool. When the bat signal lights the night sky, criminals all over Gotham are filled with the dread of knowing that the Batman is out on the hunt. He can be hiding anywhere, watching you, waiting for his moment to strike. He can see you, but you can't see him. You're probably safe. I mean, what are the chances that you'll actually run into the Batman? There's crime happening everywhere, and it's a big city, right? He's only one man, you tell yourself, but deep down, you know that he can be waiting for you down that dark alley, or looking down at you from a rooftop. You start getting paranoid, jumping at your own shadow, thinking it might be him, questioning if that noise you heard was the sound of his cape rustling in the darkness. Your heart starts to race. You've heard the stories from people who have run into him. You remember hearing about what he did to them. And now, you're thinking of what he could do to you. You tell yourself that if you can make it home, that you'll go straight. You'll never hurt anyone or steal anything ever again. But please, God, let me make it home tonight. Fear effectively turns Batman into a phantom, an apparition that could be anywhere, at any time. He's no longer just a man in a bat suit. He is a ghost that haunts the streets of Gotham and feeds on those who do it harm. Fear defines the very essence of his persona, fueling his crusade against Gotham's underworld. It's the edge he holds over his enemies. He knows that criminals all over the city tremble when they hear the roar of the Batmobile, or whenever they see the bat signal light the night sky. His gadgets are just the tools he uses to fight the war, but his ultimate weapon is fear. Now the question we'll be addressing in this video is, what happens when someone uses Batman's greatest weapon against him? Today, we're going to be taking a look at who I consider to be Batman's most terrifying and most underutilized villain in his rogues gallery. Today, we're going to be talking about Dr. Jonathan Crane, or, as he's better known as, the Scarecrow. The Scarecrow is my favorite Batman villain of all time, surpassing even the Joker. He is both one of the most sadistic and brilliant adversaries the Dark Knight has ever faced. His intellect rivals that of the Riddler and Hugo Strange. He's a sadist without an ounce of remorse for his actions. He doesn't view himself as a villain, but rather a teacher, educating Gotham through the use of fear. His experiments are often cruel and unrelenting, designed not to kill, but to mentally break his targets. Unlike many of Gotham's criminals who seek wealth, power, or fame, the Scarecrow is driven by a cold academic obsession with understanding and mastering fear. And he will stop at nothing to achieve this goal, even if it means experimenting on children. The Scarecrow is hands down one of the scariest villains the Dark Knight has ever faced. His ability to instill fear onto his enemies unsettles even Batman, who has built his own legacy on using fear against his enemies. This parallel makes the Scarecrow a deeply personal adversary for the Dark Knight, forcing Batman to confront the darkest parts of his mind. What was it that led Dr. Crane to his obsession with horror? What turned him into the psychopath we see today? Well, that's the question we'll be addressing in today's video. Like most comic characters, the Scarecrow has seen a number of changes throughout the years. The Scarecrow first debuted in 1941's World's Finest number 3. In his first appearance, Dr. Jonathan Crane is a professor of psychology who loses his job after he fires a gun in class while giving his students a lesson on fear. After his expulsion from academia, Crane adopts the persona of the Scarecrow. He works as a sort of boogeyman for hire, selling his services to crooked businessmen who use the Scarecrow to scare away their competitors. After his debut in World's Finest, Scarecrow made one more appearance in Detective Comics number 73 before the character was essentially forgotten for nearly 20 years, before he was brought back in Batman number 189. After this resurrection, the Scarecrow became one of the most recurring villains in Batman's rogues gallery, appearing in a number of different comics and shows. The Scarecrow would get his first major character overhaul in 1995's Batman Annual number 19. In this universe, Jonathan Crane is a loner, who is frequently bullied by his classmates for his thin and stick-like frame. They mockingly nickname him Ichabod, referring to the main character from the Washington Irving short story The Legend of Sleepy Hollow, Ichabod Crane, who Jonathan also happens to unfortunately share a last name with. Years of ridicule and bullying eventually drove Jonathan to snap, vowing revenge on everyone who made him feel worthless. After getting his doctorate degree in psychology, Crane becomes a professor at Gotham State University. He is soon fired for his unorthodox teaching methods and accidentally injuring one of his students after he, once again, fires a gun in class. This is when Jonathan Crane fully embraces his new persona as the Scarecrow. Crane's origin story would get revamped again in 2005's Year One, Batman and Scarecrow. Born out of wedlock to an unwilling mother and an absent father, young Jonathan is forced to live with his great-grandmother. Jonathan's great-grandmother is a religious zealot who abuses him regularly. Whenever she really wants to torture Jonathan, she'll lock him in an old abandoned church where he's attacked by crows. One night, after sneaking out of his room, Crane finds his grandmother dousing his clothes in some sort of concoction made out of herbs and rat's blood. This is how she would get the crows to attack him. This would spark Jonathan's interest in chemistry. He would continue to sneak out of his room at night and read all the books from his grandmother's private library. This is where he would continue to learn about various different forms of science, such as chemistry and psychology. He would eventually develop his own crow bait and use it on his grandmother, inadvertently killing her. Crane would grow up and go on to study at university. He would end up getting hired at GSU to teach psychology. After losing his job for, once again, firing a gun in class, he becomes a Scarecrow and swears revenge on his parents who abandoned him and left him with his sadistic great-grandmother. For today's video, we'll be focusing on the Scarecrow's origin story from the New 52 storyline, Cycle of Violence, featured in Batman The Dark Knight, issues 10 to 15. After the unexpected death of his mother, Jonathan Crane lives alone with his father, Dr. Gerald Crane. Gerald is a cold and callous man of science who cares very little about being a real father to his son. Dr. Crane's experiments are considered too unorthodox for mainstream academia. He knows that any institute or university would probably shut him down within a day. Because of this, the Cranes often struggle to make ends meet. Gerald is trying to develop a fear toxin that he can sell to the US government. However, the lack of funding has proven difficult for Dr. Crane. So, he uses his own son, Jonathan, as his test subject. Jonathan begs his father to stop the experiments on him, but Gerald isn't willing to let anything stop his progress, even if it means using his own son as a guinea pig. To collect the pheromones Gerald needs for his toxin, he has to collect Jonathan's sweat while he's experiencing extreme fear and paranoia. To achieve this, Gerald locks his son in their basement that he has filled with terrifying props for hours at a time. Dr. Gerald Crane is one of the most unforgiving and downright evil characters I've ever seen in a Batman comic. He couldn't care less about his own flesh and blood. The only thing that concerns him is progress. He looks at Jonathan no differently than a test animal. He sees him as a tool that he can use however he pleases. It's no wonder Crane grows into the cold and sadistic monster he eventually does. It's all he ever knew. Dr. Crane's evil goes beyond just mere abuse. It's methodical, calculated. The more he tortures Jonathan, the closer he can get to developing his fear toxin. He rationalizes his abuse as scientific progress, masking his sadism behind intellectual ambition. These experiments aren't just abusive, they're dehumanizing. Gerald is deliberately trying to break Jonathan's spirit, believing this is how he'll get faster results. Ever since your mother's death, it's just been the two of us, hasn't it? Us against the world. I know it's been tough sometimes. Maternal care is difficult to replicate, but I've tried to care for you as best as I could. Maybe I don't tell you this enough, but I'm proud of you. You are a pioneer, my co-pilot, you and me, explorers on the sea of fear. Now, shake it off. You bear my name, Jonathan. Make sure you live up to it. What makes Gerald so terrifying to me is the fact he doesn't see anything wrong with what he's doing. As long as he keeps getting results, he's going to continue to torture Jonathan until he can finish his toxin. The only thing that matters is progress. And if he has to break his own son in the process, then so be it. All great scientists must make sacrifices after all. And for Gerald, there's nothing he wouldn't be willing to sacrifice. One day, while Jonathan was locked down in the basement again, Gerald Crane suddenly passes away at his desk. He had a nasty habit of chain smoking. It seems the habit finally caught up to him. Of course, now that Gerald's dead, there's no one to let Jonathan out of the basement. He would be stuck in the basement for days before the police came and finally let him out. But by then, the damage was already done. He may be free from his father's abuse now, but all those days locked in the basement with no food or water completely broke him. He is beyond any possibility of rehabilitation. Life for Jonathan after his father's death didn't get any easier. He developed a stutter that led to ridicule from the other kids. Because of this, Jonathan was often alone. No friends, no family, nothing. He decided to dedicate all his time to studying. He eventually developed an interest in psychology and chemistry. Specifically, he developed an interest in learning about human fear, just like his father. After earning his doctorate, Crane becomes a psychology professor at a university, but his tenure is short-lived. He is fired after an incident where he dumps a tank of spiders on a student with arachnophobia in an attempt to help her overcome her fear. At least he didn't shoot another gun in the class again. After his exile from academia, Crane opens a private practice as a psychologist. Things would seem to go okay for a while, or that wasn't until Jonathan ended up murdering one of his clients in cold blood. The mundaneness of life started to eat away at him. He felt that he was meant for something better, something bigger. He didn't just want to understand fear, he wanted to conquer it. He decides to pick up where his late father left off and embrace his new life as a harbinger of fear. But just picking up on his father's research wasn't enough. He had to become fear itself. This is when Crane embraces his new identity as the Scarecrow. He knows he's going to have to find some test subjects. This proves to be, well, challenging. After much trial and error, Crane soon realized why his father has subjected him to so much torment. Children made for better test subjects. Their fear was more potent, yielding better results. Crane starts kidnapping children all throughout Gotham. He dumps them back into the street when he's done with them. The GCPD have been investigating these kidnappings for a while now, but they keep running to dead ends. Gordon decides to enlist the help of the Caped Crusader himself. Batman tries questioning one of the kidnap victims, a little girl named Claire. But the girl is so traumatized she hasn't spoken a word since the cops found her. Another dead end. The only thing Batman can do is try and comfort the girl. Later that night, Gordon heads home and goes to start a shower. When he tries to start the water, he gets hit with a cloud of fear toxin. He starts to hallucinate and sees his two children, Barbara and James Jr., appear in front of him. They start tormenting Gordon on his failures to protect them.
Why didn't you protect me, Daddy?
I tried, Barbara. I tried. I didn't know that the Joker... that he...
And me. Why weren't you there for me when I lost my way? Was I a stain on your clean record, Dad?
No, James. No,
Is that why you scrubbed me from your memory?
Never. I never...
We're sorry, Dad. We're sorry we blemished your life.
I'm sorry. Just stop blaming me and put everything back where it goes.
There, little puppet. Save your strength. We're just getting started.
Crane kidnaps Gordon and brings him back to his lair. Bruce learns about the kidnapping and goes to investigate Gordon's apartment. He's had some run-ins with Scarecrow already and is familiar with his fear toxin. Batman knows it's Scarecrow behind all disappearances, but he still doesn't know where to go. He decides to go back to Claire to see if he can try to learn anything. After Batman gets Claire to open up about her stuffed duck, she finally talks again and gives Batman a license plate from the van that she was picked up by. Hollow Man. Batman finds the van outside of an old rickety house. He finds Gordon tied up in the attic and decides to move in. This was all trapped by Scarecrow. Crane shoots Batman with one of the most ridiculous shotguns I've ever seen. Batman falls into an old minecart, and Crane gives him a taste of his new fear toxin formula. To become the master of fear, Scarecrow needs to completely conquer everything that scares him. And there's only one thing in the world that he fears: Batman. Crane understands that both him and Batman use fear as their ultimate weapon, but only one of them can be the true master of fear. They both can't exist. Crane could easily kill Batman right now if he wanted to, but that would be too easy. It'd feel like cheating. Crane wants to use Batman's own fears to destroy him.
Little pretty bat who flew his way to me, look into the looking glass and tell me what you see. Shall we discuss the past?
Bruce relives various moments throughout his life. The Monarch Theater, Crime Alley, the gunshots. It was fear that made Batman beg his parents to leave the theater that night they were killed. Fear defined nearly every moment of Bruce's life. And when he became the Batman, he realized he needed to conquer all of his own fears if he was going to use it as a weapon against his enemies. Bruce thought he conquered them, but he realizes now that all he's done is suppress them. Crane is going to bring those fears out and see if Batman can truly kill them for good, or if they're going to kill him. He hits him with another dose of fear toxin and leaves him to face his fears. While Crane has Batman locked away, he's still conducting his experiments on other children.
Mr. Scarecrow? I know why you keep me here, but don't worry. If you let me go, you won't be alone. Look, I drew this for you. Please, can I go home? I just want to get out of here. It's so dark down here, and I'm so scared.
Crane starts getting flashbacks from the basement again. It seems he hasn't completely conquered all of his fears yet either. After Bruce regains consciousness, he activates the lasers hidden in his gauntlets and sneaks away from the torture room. But before Bruce can escape, Crane pops out of the shadows and slashes the Batman's chest open. Batman tries to crawl to the light, but he chokes on his own blood before he can make it.
You didn't go anywhere at all. I have a new toy, and you'll be the first to use it. It's a super toxin, so potent that I don't have antibodies for it in my own bloodstream. That's why for today's performance, I'll be equipped somewhat differently.
It was all hallucination. The super toxin is far stronger than his previous toxin.
You've been the perfect guinea pig. I'll be right back. It's time to get my scythe.
Before Crane can come back, Bruce is able to break free from his chains and get his suit back on. He tries to lunge at Crane, but ends up getting pierced by his giant scythe. Scarecrow digs his blade into Bruce's chest and brings him to his knees. Bruce is narrowly able to grab his grapple gun and shoots Scarecrow through the bottom of his jaw. Bruce has enough strength to drag himself outside, but he is losing a lot of blood really fast. Alfred's able to patch Bruce up and give him some more blood, but it was a really close call. Crane's able to pull the hook from his jaw and grabs the vials of his new toxin formula before setting his lair ablaze. With his jaw practically hanging off of his face, Crane launches the second part of his attack. He unleashes his new toxin formula on the citizens of Gotham. Within minutes, all hell breaks loose. This new formula doesn't just show its victims their worst fears, it turns them into mindless zombies clawing at each other. Despite still being in bad shape, Bruce suits up and sets out to stop Scarecrow once and for all. Down on the street, it is utter mayhem. Batman and the other first responders are trying to get people out as quickly as they can, but things are getting out of control really fast. Alfred acquires the help of Lucius Fox to develop a cure for the toxin, but they run into a very big problem. Without any antibodies, it could take months before Lucius could develop a cure. Bruce can't afford a few minutes, let alone a few months. If he doesn't do something quick, a lot of people are going to die. While all this is going on, a thug sneaks up behind Batman and knocks off his gas mask. Bruce realizes the fear toxin has no effect on him. Since he was already exposed to the gas earlier, he's already built up antibodies to it in his bloodstream. With no time left to spare, he crashes right into Wayne Tower so Lucius can extract the antibodies from his blood. Right when things were starting to look hopeful, they run into another problem. It's going to take days to replicate enough of his antibodies to create a cure. Knowing he's running out of time, Bruce comes up with another idea. He's going to have his blood administered directly into the Batwing's aerosol diffuser and disperse it all over Gotham Square. Bruce has already lost a lot of blood from his fight before with Scarecrow. He's already running on fumes, but he knows if he doesn't do this, thousands of lives are at stake. With no other options left, Alfred hooks up an IV directly into Bruce's veins to the diffuser, and Bruce flies back to Gotham Square. He starts dispensing his blood on the citizens below, and it actually starts to work. It's reversing the effects of Crane's super toxin, but it's taking a lot more blood than he thought. Toxin spread quicker than he was anticipating. He starts losing consciousness and has Damian take over the flight controls for the Batwing. He makes Damian promise that he won't bring him home until every single person down below is cured. Bruce ends up going into cardiac arrest and gets rushed back to the Batcave. Alfred is eventually able to bring Bruce back to life, and after giving him enough blood, he goes back out and tracks down Scarecrow to another hideout. Crane is arrested and thrown back into Arkham Asylum, where he's tortured day and night from his memories in the basement. Cycle of Violence is, in my opinion, Scarecrow in his most terrifying form, at least as far as the comics go. The Scarecrow has appeared in a number of many other comics, shows, and movies. He's one of the more recurring characters you'll see throughout the Batman universe. One of the more popular versions of the character was when he was portrayed by Cillian Murphy in the Dark Knight trilogy. Unfortunately, despite his numerous appearances within various Batman mediums, the Scarecrow is still a majorly underutilized character. Even when he does show up, he usually just ends up being a lackey to some other villain who ends up taking the spotlight. He's treated more as an obstacle for Batman to get through, rather than a serious threat. Of course, you can't talk about the Scarecrow without bringing up the Arkham series. Scarecrow first made his appearance in the Arkhamverse all the way back in 2009's Batman Arkham Asylum. This version of the character is a lot different than the one we'd end up seeing again in 2015's Batman Arkham Knight. In fact, when you compare the two versions together, it can feel kind of jarring. They don't even seem like they're the same character. But there is a reason for this. By the end of Asylum, Crane was heavily disfigured from the injuries he sustained by Killer Croc. His vocal cords were ripped to shreds and required extensive surgery to repair. This explains why his voice sounds so different and why he can't act as animated as he did before. His leg was also injured, forcing him now to wear a leg brace at all times. He isn't able to move like he was in Asylum, forcing him to rely on foot soldiers to keep Batman away from him. His face was completely mutilated by Croc. If there was any remaining piece of Jonathan Crane left, it died that day in the sewers. This is when Crane decides to fully embrace his alter ego and becomes the Scarecrow we see in Night. He grafts pieces of his mask onto his face and implants his breathing device directly into his jaw. This isn't a mask. This is quite literally what's left of his face. Compared to his first appearance in Asylum, this iteration of Scarecrow is far more menacing and grotesque, reflecting his complete transformation into a symbol of fear. This is by far the best and most terrifying Scarecrow design we have ever gotten. I know some people might prefer his design from the new Batman Adventures over this one, and that design's great too, but nothing compared to this. I mean, just look at him. Do I even need to say anything else? This design is a thing of nightmares. His near-death experience by the hands of Killer Croc left him both physically scarred and mentally unhinged. No longer content with just toying with Batman, Crane escalated his terror to a citywide level. Crane learned an important lesson back in the asylum. When Batman overcame his fear toxin, he realized he wasn't going to be able to destroy the Dark Knight with chemistry alone. If he was truly going to kill Batman, then he was going to need to kill everything he loves. His city, his friends, his family. Scarecrow wants to prove to the city of Gotham that even the strongest hero can be reduced to nothing when confronted with his deepest fears. Crane knows if Batman falls, then Gotham will fall with them. I have a lot of problems with Arkham Knight, particularly with aspects of the story and how many gameplay sections require the Batmobile. But one thing I will always give this game credit for is that it gave us the most terrifying Scarecrow we have seen to this day. Personally, I really hope we see the Scarecrow eventually show up in the Matt Reeves universe. I think he would be perfect for a movie that's as dark and as gritty as the Batman was. If they do bring him back in live action, I really hope they base his look off of his character design from Arkham Knight. Imagine seeing this in live action. That would be a thing of nightmares. If Matt Reeves can make the Riddler of all characters as terrifying as he did, then imagine what he could do for a character like the Scarecrow.
I gave you all a gift, stripped away your pretenses, and let you be the frightened beasts you all are inside. Be grateful, Gotham. Accept what I have shown you about your true selves. People of Gotham, I'm going to give you something. A gift unlike anything you've experienced before. You are, all of you, soon to confront the darkness inside yourselves. You'll be forever changed.